Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Intro to HTML and CSS workshop. We'll be starting shortly, but in the meanwhile, if you guys have not checked out the quick start guide doc yet, feel free to click on the link that was just sent into the chat and check it out. It'll have all the resources that we need for tonight, and also it can help you along while you're editing your code as well. Make sure you also have your glitch account set up, and the quick start guide should guide you on how to do that. And yeah, the easiest way will be to sign up using Google. So if you guys want to do that, if you haven't already, feel free to do so. We'll be starting shortly.
Okay, let's get started. I think everyone's basically here. Well, hi guys, welcome to the Intro to HTML and CSS workshop. My name is Karen.
I'm Kimberly.
And I'm Brianna.
I'm Andrew.
And I'm Hannah.
And I'm Joseph.
Yeah, and we will be your hosts for tonight's workshop. We want to make sure that this workshop is easy and comfortable to follow for students of all backgrounds, so please let us know if at any time you have any problems. Do keep in mind though, this workshop is being recorded, so please keep yourself muted throughout so that the workshop will run smoothly. And with that out of the way, let's introduce PTC and our mission. It's not working. There we go. Okay, so, sorry. Our mission here at PTC is to provide accessible opportunities for students like you to learn about the field of technology. And we hope that today, through this event, you guys will be able to gain a better understanding of HTML and CSS. So let's go over Zoom. So again, as I mentioned, this workshop will be recorded for the PTC YouTube channel. So make sure that you're muted throughout to ensure that this workshop will run smoothly. And if you do happen to have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat, and one of the execs can try and answer your questions. There are also other ways to get our attention, such as the reactions function on Zoom. It should be at the bottom of your screen. And if you have any questions, you could click the quick reactions or the raise hand function. Finally, if you guys have any private issues to resolve, feel free to use the private chat function in the chat over there, and you can contact one of the execs privately. So the execs will all have PTC in front of their name, and feel free to contact any of them at any time, but preferably one that isn't speaking, because we can't really see the chat when we're talking. So with that out of the way, let's go over our agenda for today. So today we will be starting off with a quick introduction to HTML and CSS. After that, I'll help you set up your workspace on Glitch, and then we can get started with our HTML lesson and our CSS lesson. And after we're done all of those, we will be giving you some tips on where to go after this workshop. So let's start off with some terms and concepts. First of all, what is HTML? HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's basically the language that communicates with your browser to describe the contents of your web page. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it's the language that we use to edit things like fonts, colors, layout, etc. And as we explore the applications of each system, we'll come to see why that they are often introduced and presented together, because a good website will require both HTML as its skeleton and CSS for the styling. So let's move on to the more interactive portion of our workshop, which is making a recipe page. So today, we're going to help you make your own recipe page, and you guys will be able to get creative with it. You guys can change the titles, add photos, listing ingredients, and more. We will be providing a template for you, but throughout our activities, we encourage you to edit the template and add your own new sections. You guys can also change some styling things to make your website more you. So let's set up your workspace on glitch.com. So if you guys got the email, you'll know that we're using Glitch today. And if you have a Google account, you can just sign up with that. So like your school email, or if you have your own Gmail account. And once you have your account ready, you can open the link in the chat, which will probably be sent by Joseph. And yeah, that's going to give you a link to our template. And from there, you can create the remix button, which will be basically project options button. It's in the top left corner. And under that, you will have a remix button, which will basically create a copy of the template so that you can edit along with us. And all right, so that's basically it for now. I'll give you guys a bit of time to set up your workspace. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to comment in the chat. And yeah, we can help you guys through. I'll give you guys a few minutes to set up your workspace. Actually, when you guys are done setting up, could you guys send a quick message in the chat just saying I'm done so that we can, know when everyone's ready? That would be great. I think everyone is done setting up their account, right? All right, then let's move on. Hold on. Okay, so I'm just going to go over quickly the file structures so that, everything's a bit more clear. So once you have your remix created, you'll notice that on the side of your screen, you'll have a like a window kind of with all of your files. And so I'm just going to go over each one of them. So the index.html file, I'll just highlight it here. That's going to be the file with all of your HTML code. And we'll mainly be focusing on that file in the first portion of the workshop. The one below is the style.css file, which, as the name suggests, it has all of your CSS code. And we'll be editing that in the later portion of the workshop. And these files need to be connected in order for the index.html file to know to take styling rules from the style.css file. And at the top of the window here, you'll have an assets like button, I guess. Basically, that's where all of your assets will be stored. So these are things like images, videos, audio, etc. And those are all the ones that are going to be used in your project. Okay, so to add an asset to your site, I'm just going to quickly go over that. So to upload an asset from your device's local storage, you basically just click on that and it'll prompt you to upload an asset. And from there, you can like drag and drop, I believe. You just drag and drop your file into it. And then from there, it'll appear in the assets page. And then whenever you need to use it, you can just click on it and it will give you a link. Okay, so now for seeing your site. So basically, as you're editing along, you'll probably want to see what your site looks like. And Glitch actually makes this really easy because it has a split screen function. So you'll have your code on one side and then like a preview of your site on the other side. And if you want to see like the full version of your website, you can click on the sunglasses icon and it'll prompt you to either in a new window or along with the code. And if you click on the in a new window button, it'll give you the full version of your site in a new window. Okay, now before I pass it on to our next host, Brianna, I just want to give you guys some general programming tips. Yeah, so number one, make sure that your code is readable and well formatted, because when you're going through your code and seeing what you want to change and edit, or perhaps you have something that's like a bug or something, if it's easy to read, then it's easier to find these problems or easy to find things that you want to change. So also it just looks neater and like better. Yeah, and another tip, don't be afraid to Google things. Programmers of all levels of experience will Google things every day, and it's not shameful to do so. There's a lot of resources online, such as W3 Schools and MDN documentation. These are listed in the slides, and perhaps Joseph can link the sites in the chat. And yeah, so that's all for me. Have fun, guys, and I'll pass it on to Brianna.
Okay, so hi guys. Hopefully everyone is set up by now. If not, feel free to message one of our execs. Again, PTC will be labeled in front of their names, and they'll help you get set up. So to start our main workshop portion tonight, we will begin by introducing and developing the basics of HTML. HTML elements are the basic units of HTML and can be identified by the start and end tags. They are the combination of the tags and the content in between. HTML tags are not displayed but are used to interpret the content of the page. So HTML tags are hidden keywords that tell your browser how to format and display each element of your website. Each piece of content you put on your website has to be inside a tag. There are a few rules for formatting. First, you need to have a doc type declaration. It's the first line of code right there. This is not a tag. It just tells the computer what kind of document to expect. Next is an HTML tag, which tells the computer where the tag starts and ends. Inside the HTML tag, we can put the HTML code. Usually, you will include the essential tags, which are 4 types of HTML tags that are needed to form the basic structure for every HTML file. So to begin with, we have the HTML tag, which we just discussed. And this basically defines the document as a web page. It also identifies the beginning and the end of the HTML document, and all other tags must fall in between the HTML tags. Next, we have the header tag, and don't mistake this with the heading tag that we'll be learning about later. The header contains information about the document that will not appear on the actual page, such as the title of the document, the author, which style sheet to use, and also the meta tags. We also have the title tag, which defines the title that will appear in the title part of your web browser. and the title must appear between the head tags. And then lastly, we have the body tag. So the body tags contain all the information and other visible content on the page. All your images, links, and plain text must go between the body and the /body tags. So these 4 tags are special. There must only be one set of each, and they must be in the correct order, like in the example on the slide. So heading tags are used to create headings in your web page, and different heading tags will create different size text. For example, if you check the code in the HTML file, the top header line with the largest text is marked by H1. H1 is the highest level among heading tags, while H6 is the lowest. By lowest, we mean the smallest. So paragraph tags are used for paragraphs of text. You can insert a BR tag to put in a line break. These tags are very useful and easy to use, especially for something like the recipe pages you're making. Paragraph tags are called in the format showed on the screen, with P at the start and /P at the end, and the content in the middle. So div tags don't affect the contents of your page, but they are useful to divide your content in your code to hold specific HTML elements. Since they are containers of sections, the content they hold can be styled easily using the class or ID attributes. We'll talk about styling with CSS later. For now, you can stick with the idea that div tags separate content and can be defined with class or ID attributes as such. An example is on the slide. So let's move on to image tags. Image tags are used to add images to your web page. Notice that they don't need a closing tag. The image tag has 2 required attributes, CRC and alt. So CRC specifies the path to the image. It's really just the image name, like the file name. And as can be seen for the example on the slide, the image location would be PTC _ logo.png. And alt specifies an alternate text for the image. If the image for some reason cannot be displayed, the alt text will be. So on the slide, the alt text for the image that would be displayed is PTC logo. So all right, let's get into our first activity. For this activity, you'll be editing the code to implement your own recipes for your recipe page. You guys can edit the code using your knowledge of tags and elements to add your own recipes to the page. If you need any help, feel free to use the chat to message one of us. Now give it a shot on your own.
Yeah, so you'll see in your index.html, you'll see your activity 1. This is what you'll be doing for now. So you'll see that your heading title is right here, your paragraph title is right here, and your image is right here for the 3 first things on your website. So maybe you want to change this heading to maybe my mom's cake recipe. Once you enter it, it'll change the title from brownies to cake. And you can do this with any of these paragraphs, the headings, and for the images, if you downloaded an asset, like myself, I downloaded this cake. I can now copy the link and change this photo from a brownie to a cake. So go ahead and try that. And if you finish early and you're satisfied with your new and creative website, go ahead and try the challenge activity. Yeah, so if you want to remix your project, you would click on, yeah, you click on the top right if you were using our template, and then you would click on Remix Project, and then this will send the project to your own storage, and then you can edit as you please. So before we move on, I'll just give a little demonstration on how you would do the challenge activity. So the challenge activity is to create a table using the table tag to create like this chart to say like prep time, cook time, and total recipe time. So I inserted my table tag, and now I'll do TR for each individual input. So the first thing would be prep time, and you see it would pop up right there. The next one would be time, and you see it pops up right next to it. And finally, we have our total recipe time. And you see it pops up close to each other. You can edit it along the way, but we'll move on with the presentation, and you can keep editing as we go.
Now that we've finished our first activity, let's move on to some more tags. So the hyperlink tag allows you to insert a link. The start tag will include the href, which contains the URL of the site that you will link, and then in between the tags is the word that you want to link the URL to. So there's an example on the slide. The next tags are list tags. So these will allow you to insert bullet points or numbered lists in your web page. The UL are for bullet points, and the OL are for numbered lists. As you can see, this is what they should look like when they show up on your web page. Now, attributes are the keywords in the tags that describe and or have more information on how to display the HTML elements. Each attribute has a name and a value. There are some we are about to learn right now. So the ID attribute is a unique ID to identify a particular element. So for the first highlighted ID you can see on the slide, ID is valued for about. It will display the about me in a heading format. The next highlighted ID's value is facts, and it will display some cool facts about you. The next attribute we will talk about is the class attribute. The class attribute can be added to multiple elements and is used to group elements together. So here, class is equal to intro, groups displaying about me as well as displaying hi, nice to meet you in the same class attribute. Now it's time for our second HTML activity. For our second activity, you will be tasked with creating an ordered recipe instruction list. Recall the tags that we just discussed and try to edit the instructions to match your own recipe.
Yeah, so for our second activity, you'll see down here, activity 2, adding recipe instructions. We're trying to make an ordered list on how to make your recipe that you want to put on a website. So first of all, let's make a heading. We use the h3 tag as it's a subheader instead of a main header, and we will call this instructions or whatever you'd like to call it. And there, it should pop up right there before our recipe notes header. So next, to add the list, you would have to press in u.ol, ol meaning that the list is numbered. And so when you do arrows li, let's say for cake, I want to have flour, right? So I would pour 4 cups of flour into a bowl. And it should come up right there. See, it's numbered 1, and pour 4 cups of flour in the bowl. If you keep adding more, it'll keep numbering 1, 2, 3, all the way up until how many you would want to add. And yeah, feel free to be creative and make a lot of interesting instructions. All right, it's time to move on with the presentation, but if you want to keep editing, by all means, keep editing. This is your website that you're creating, so if you want to make it look good, please do.
Okay, hopefully you all had some fun trying out some various HTML activities, and feel free to continue editing, as Andrew said, as you want to move forward, or ask any questions in the chat as they come up. So for our second section, we will now be talking about CSS styling, and this is where we take the skeleton of the HTML code and use CSS styling to link the images to the code and make it look all pretty. So let's first discuss CSS declarations, which build the foundation of CSS styling. To write a declaration, we must first select which HTML element we want to style and identify it as our selector. And then we will add a pair of curly brackets to write our property styling within. And within the brackets, we will write out the property name, then a colon, and then the property value. And on that note, it is important to know what you want to style with as many properties as you wish within the declaration. So you can kind of put whatever you want. You can change the font style, change the color. It's really up to you. But first off, the declarations must be made within the set of the curly brackets, as I said before, and they will be separated with a colon and then ended with a semicolon. And I'll be discussing the different properties in CSS that you can use within a declaration to design your site. The first property that I'll be talking about is the text property. So it allows you to change your color, the line height, and the text alignment of whatever you'd like. So that's within the code right there. The next thing I like to talk about is the size and position property. So this allows you to adjust things like images. So here the code specifies the height, width, and padding of the image, and padding in this case represents the amount of space between the content of the image and then the border of the website. So as you can see here, the width is 50 pixels, height is 50 pixels, and the padding is 5 pixels. And you can change this to whatever you'd like. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the font property. So this allows you to change things like font size, font style, and font family. So the font family is basically what font you want your text to be in. So right now we have Helvetica, Arial, Sans Serif, but there's a lot more that you can choose from. While we're here, does anyone have any questions right now about the properties before we jump into our first activity? If not, you can pop them into the chat later. But let's get started with our first CSS activity. So for this one, we'll be trying to change the background of your web page to your favorite color. And as always, if you need any help, please message. Okay, so font family, that's essentially just like the name of the font that you want to use. So if you go back to the previous slide, we had like Arial, Helvetica. So you can change it to whatever you'd like. So Arial is like a type of font, if you know like what it looks like. It's just the classic font that you typically get with like Google Docs or Word, but you can change it. For this one, we put 3 fonts, but you don't have to in your code. You can just put 1. For this example, there were multiple though. You can put both. So you can put the color name, and Hannah, our demonstrator, will show you that later. But you can also put the like hex code if you'd like to. So for Patrick's question, maybe we should just jump into the demonstration in the activity.
Okay, so activity 1 is to change the background background color of your site. So I'm going to go here to my HTML selector, and I'm going to go to the property of the background property. So right now it's set to the property value of Alice Blue, and I'm going to change it into my favorite color, pink. We challenge you guys to find the wackiest HTML color you can find and set it as the background of your website.
Okay, we'll now be moving on. So if you have any questions again about this activity, feel free to ask in the chat. And if you didn't finish, you can continue changing the color of your site as we keep talking. So now that we have a general idea of what CSS styling looks like, let's try to focus our design and alter specific attributes to our liking. So to do that, we usually use selectors for this purpose because they can choose and modify elements depending on their type or grouping. And today we will be focusing on the simpler selectors that involve the element attributes we talked about earlier in the HTML section, such as class and ID. So the first type of selector we're going to be talking about is the element selector. So this uses the element name to determine which sections to change. So it would have, this case, the element name is P, and then you have your open bracket and then your properties, and then you close your bracket in here. And then the next one that we will be talking about is class selectors. So these are similar to the element selectors, but instead of elements, they use classes to determine which ones to change. So one important thing to note is you must have a period before the class name in order to change everything within your curly brackets. So if you look at how you defined your previous classes in HTML, you can see which ID to use, and it typically would be the class name. And then you would put your properties inside and then close it with the curly bracket to finish. And the next type is the ID selector. So these use ID attributes of the HTML elements to determine which sections to alter. So if you remember the ID elements we defined earlier, we can use this selector to change the style properties of these elements. And then for this specific selector, you have to use the hashtag before the ID code. And then everything would change, so like the color blue and then the font size. And then aside from these three selectors we just talked about, there are a couple of other basic selector tools to use as well. So there is the universal selector, which selects all the HTML elements on the page. So you do want to be careful with using this because any slight change or mistake will alter the design of your whole site. But if you want to change everything in your HTML code to look a certain way, you would use the asterisk and then put your properties inside after. And then finally, there's a grouping selector that selects all HTML elements with the same style definitions. So in this case, you can, if I wanted to change like the capital HI to the heading, and then the second heading, and then the paragraph one, I can separate them by commas, and then change everything within the brackets to the color blue, and the font size to 12 pixels. And apart from these selectors, there are still many more that we won't mention just to keep this workshop concise. But if you do want to check out other selectors to enhance your web pages after this workshop, you can use the resource W3 Schools, as they provide many different explanations for the other tools you can use. And I think we are now fully equipped to do some more styling ourselves. So we'll be moving on to our second CSS activity. And for this one, you'll be trying to change the header of your web page and using the things we've learned about the CSS selectors and the rules. You can also create your own CSS rule to modify the header. So if you need a hint, message us in the chat, but Hannah will give a demonstration of the activity.
Okay, so activity 2, create a CSS rule for the title of your site and change its font. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to write out my H1, my header 1 selector. And then inside, I'm going to type out the property name that I want to change. So in the activity, it says change the font. So I'm going to type out the property value, the property name, sorry, font family. And then I'm going to select which font I want. I'm personally going to choose Lucida Console. And then on top of this, on top of the name, we have to type out some additional information that we need. So this font specifically needs a few more details. Okay, and then after I type that out, you can see on the very side that my font has changed. It now looks more serif. And of course, as we mentioned before, you can feel free to add whatever different, you can alter as many features as you want. So you can alter the size, the font color, etc. Feel free. Okay, so if you guys finished this activity 2, we have this challenge activity down here. So CSS challenge activity, add a custom web font. So the default fonts are kind of boring, so we can use other fonts on Google. So to add a Google font, what we have to do is we have to first go into our HTML and we have to add this link. I personally typed it out and I left it in comments, so I'm just going to uncomment it. It's quite a long link. So essentially what it is, it's a link tag that references a link that attaches to all these Google fonts that we want. So now that I have this link, I'm going to go back to my CSS and I'm going to go down to my header. And now I can select the Google font that I just linked. So I'm going to choose Sophia. And now I have to type out the other information that I need. I'm going to pick, and there you go. Now I have a much fancier font thanks to Google. But yeah, try it out. So I'll send this link to you guys in the chat, but this one specifically is for the font Sophia I just wanted to mention. If you want to link different fonts, you just have to make a quick Google search for it and it should pop up right away when you search Google font, I believe HTML link to a specific Google font.
Okay, so I hope you all enjoyed that activity. If you want to share your font in the chat, feel free to do that. But if not, we're going to be moving on to the last portion of this workshop. So we will be talking about the general layout of any web page. So this is the general layout of a web page based on CSS. So any good web page should have a header, a navigation menu, the content sections, and then a footer. So in order to make sure that everything in your site looks right like this, you can use different tags that we will be talking about. So in the HTML portion, you can use div tags that were set up. to make sure that everything is set up into these different sections. So the header, and then separate by your div tag. And then you can put your navigation menu after. So you can adjust the margins, height, size, and much more. And there are also other tools such as the CSS Flexbox and CSS Grid to help you put the divs where you want so that your web page just looks as you want it to look. But other than that, this will conclude our workshop on HTML and CSS. And if you want more resources on web development, feel free to check out the resources we sent before. If Joseph can send them again, it is W3 Schools and then freecodecamp.org as well. So on your own time, you could try creating your own website from scratch, or even look into JavaScript, which we didn't talk about today. But if you use JavaScript, you could try and make your site more dynamic, and even have it accept user inputs. And then one final suggestion, if you really want to go above and beyond, would be to look into the CSS Flexbox or CSS Grid that we mentioned earlier, so that your site designs look more and more professional. But thank you all for joining our workshop, and we hope you all had a great time.
Thank you guys so much. On the topic of the slides, unfortunately, we will not be able to share the slides, but the video will be up soon. And so once we send out a follow-up email, just recapping what we learned today, you guys can go check out the video. It'll have all the content that we covered today if you want to take a look at that. Feel free to ask any final questions as well, since we'll be keeping this call open until 8, but that is all for the workshop. How long have we been coding? I think it varies for everyone on the team. Where will this video be posted? Likely on the PTC YouTube channel, but we will link that in the follow-up email as well. So you guys don't need to worry about searching that or trying to find that. What gave us an interest in coding? I think that also varies among the team members. Personally, I just wanted to try something new. I don't know if any of the other exec members want to talk a bit about their experience as well.
For me, I started coding, I think 3 years ago, not too sure. And I think I got into coding because my mom wanted me to. But I mean, kind of worked out because I really like it now. But yeah, that's from me.
For me, I started coding around 2 to 3 years ago. What started my interest in coding was really everyone in my family is involved in STEM. So it was just something I was interested in growing up.
For me, I actually didn't really want to start coding when I was young, because my parents are like computer programmers, and I was like, I don't really want to go down the same route. But then I eventually started because I was doing like a position at a lab, but then a lot of the stuff in labs now, you actually need to learn how to code. So I started taking coding seriously probably like 2 to 3 years ago. Although I did like pick it up from here and there, like when I was young, but I didn't really take it seriously. I was just doing it really casually.
For me, I kind of started over COVID because there was nothing to do, and my dad was like, "Oh, you should learn Python." And because both my parents are computer programmers, so I could just ask them any question I wanted, and I was like, "Oh, hey, how do I do this in Python?" They'd be like, "Oh, yeah, it's super simple." And then grade 10, we had a computer studies, I believe. It was our class name, and we learned a bit about JavaScript and we started off with Scratch. But I mean, like, Scratch kind of was the building blocks for coding, and then I got into JavaScript, and it was pretty fun.
Yeah, so that's a bit about us. I think that brings us to the 8 o'clock mark. So once again, thank you all for those who are still here for coming to check out our workshop for tonight and hopefully learn something new. As always, you can feel free to reach out to us if you have any other questions about PTC or maybe about the team as well on the PTC Ottawa Instagram. And yeah, also check us out on the Project Tech Conferences website, as we'll be hosting many events to come in the future.